On this episode, we're going to take you back through a couple Q&A sessions that Bill and I did. It's all about SBA financing and franchising and how to put these two powerful tools together to become an ultimate business owner. So stay tuned and we'll see you on the inside.
You know, the projections are always a little bit challenging. What you really want to do is when you're going into the franchise process, as you're doing your validation, you really want to find out what the average, depending what kind of franchise this is, but let's just say you're buying an HVAC franchise. You know, what's the average ticket price, right? Like the average ticket price is $7,300. Okay, well that you now know this. You know, how many sales are we going to do? How many service calls are we going to do as we're ramping up? So then you're figuring out basically the projected revenue, right? And then you're going to use some of the FDD, franchise disclosure document. You're going to be calling the other franchisees in the system, and you're going to find out, you're going to go over all those expenses. And typically once you sign the franchise agreement, they're going to help you work on your pro forma and your projections for your SBA financing. But that I would say would be the best route to go in the beginning. And it's actually a good drill because you're going to go through it, you're going to learn, and you're going to really figure out like, what's the marketing budget? You know, what's the labor cost per month? And as I ramp up, how much more is that going to be? So I think you should take your time and really get this down because you got to understand the numbers.
Hello, Beau. I've been following your channel for a while. I work in real estate investment and my main job involves managing a car dealership. Recently, some of us at work have been discussing the possibility of venturing into a new business. Do you have any suggestions on how to go about creating a viable business model for this endeavor? Regards, Dylan.
So Dylan, I was actually talking about this with one of the ladies I work with, and I think there's a lot of options. I also interviewed somebody on my channel, and he doesn't go out and get debt. He just raises capital from private investors, and then they buy a franchise and get it running, and then there's no debt, and that gets spread out through whatever their documents say as far as their profit share plan and all that good stuff. So, you know, if there's a couple of you at work, depending on everybody's level, right? Like, even if it's a passive business model, people are going to have, you're going to have to, your books and your accounting and different things like that. So from a business model standpoint, I mean, if you're all going to be equal partners in dollar amount, then you could do it some kind of equal, it could be equal across the board. If it's a $400,000 investment, there's 4 partners, everybody puts up $100,000. And then your LLC documents or entity documents would spell out, who's got what jobs, right? I think the important thing in any partnership or any business entity is to have a really good thought out operating agreement that lays out the what ifs. If somebody wants to cash out and doesn't want to be part of the business anymore, I think I'm seeing more and more of these. I'm having a lot of calls with like 3 or 4 people that want to partner, which is cool. I think it's smart, but I also know that a lot of partnerships fail. So you really want to lay down like the rules and like everybody's on board in the beginning, and you leave as many variables as you can. You want to address every variable you can possibly and have the what ifs, and if somebody were to die or whatever happens, that everything is shared. Now, if some people are just money partners and they don't want anything to do with it, I think there could be different splits. There could be different, on real estate syndication and real estate deals, there's waterfalls, there's the general partners, there's the limited partners. You can take a look at some of those frameworks and then figure it out. And then I would definitely get an attorney to draft this up for you. So it's all legal and binding and everything. We don't do that, but I would say from a framework, I would come up with a rough draft of the model you want, and then then once you guys have a plan that you can agree to, then you have it drafted up by some sort of attorney. Would be the way to go. Anyways, happy to talk to you more if you want. You can always go to bookwithbeau.com. Thanks for the question.
Hey, Beau, I'm wondering how I can determine the approval amount for purchasing a franchise startup. Currently, I have $45,000 in liquid funds and an additional $50,000 that I can convert by selling some stocks. Thank you, Raul.
So it depends. I mean, we have some banks that we work with. So our company, we work as advisors where we find the right bank, credit union, and bring the deal to. So depending on the deal, we will then source the bank or credit union. So on something like this, some banks say, hey, anything that's a startup, even if it's a franchise, we're going to be at 70%. Some of them will go to 90%. They all have different boxes. Some of them say we'll go to 90%, but we need 10% equity injection. We need 7 or 8 months of reserves in the bank. So when we factor that all in, that's where we figure out what bank will actually do this. So based on this, with low reserves, we're able to get deals done with very low reserves, because one bank we work with, for example, they'll build in the working capital and they'll use that as part of your reserves. So they don't say, hey, we need the equity injection of 10% plus 8 months of reserves. They'll look at it kind of combined. So really what they need is the equity injection. And they're going to pull out an SBSS, which is a credit scoring model for small businesses that the SBA uses. And assuming you score 165 or better on that, then it's very probable. So to determine then your total project costs, we're going to figure out what the franchise requirements are. So let's just say it's an HVAC company and their requirements on the FDD are to have 2 trucks, 1,000 square foot of office space. We're going to calculate that. That's all going to go into your total project cost. We need those numbers. A lot of people just look at they get the FDD and they say, oh, I need this much. Well, we have to break it down. We have to get invoices. You don't have to go buy the lease or sign the lease documents. We have to get copies of those leases. So assuming we get that all, that becomes the total project cost, then we calculate it. So essentially, if you have 10% equity injection plus a little bit of reserves and your credit's good and you have a good track record, typically we can get these deals done. They're usually looking for a franchise model that's got at least 20 units. If it doesn't have 20 units as a startup franchise model, then there's some other caveats. But anyway, that's how we figure out what you need. Remember, every bank's got a little bit different box. So once we have the scenario together, they go out and find the right box, the right lender to match it with. So that's how it works. Go to bookwithbeau.com and I'll set up a call with you and we can discuss in detail.
Hey Beau, your video has inspired me to pursue a business or franchise purchase. Could you please guide me on the necessary documents for a business acquisition compared to starting a franchise from scratch? Thanks.
Sure. So if we're talking about SBA, there's going to be a lot of the similar forms. SBA Form 413, personal financial statement. 1919, that's your personal information. It's kind of like an application. Your tax returns for the last 3 years, bank statements, resume. And then if you're buying a franchise, we need a franchise disclosure document. So let's just say it's a franchise startup, 3 years of projections. If you're buying an existing business, we need 3 years of seller's tax returns and a year to date. So it's pretty much all the same documents except for getting the tax returns from the seller and a few other items as you progress, like AR, accounts receivable, inventory, and equipment. We have worksheets for that, but that's after you get your term sheet, you would do that paperwork. But similar processes, really. SBA process isn't that much different. On the franchise purchase, the franchise disclosure document is going to say how many units they have. It's harder. It's easier to finance a well-established franchise, meaning they have 50 plus units, but anything 10 units and greater is easier than 1 or 2 units and they're just starting out. But those are all still financeable. We just got to understand what it is, what type of franchise, get the franchise disclosure. We build out your projections and business plan, and similar process though. So the existing business may be a little bit easier if it's cash flowing, and most banks will lend higher proceeds on an existing cash flowing business, whether it's a franchise or non-franchise type business. But on a franchise, 80 to 90% is achievable. Business acquisition up to 90% is achievable. Plus, on a business acquisition, you can get the seller to do a little bit of a carryback, and we've talked about that in other episodes. But feel free to book a call below. We could dive into the details of both options and give you a little bit more clarity. Thanks for the question, Jill. So it's a relatively low startup cost type of franchise. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look on the SBA directory, see if it's approved franchise, and possibly do SBA 7A financing. Let's say it's not on the approved SBA directory. What I would envision here is that you've got good credit, 730 plus, you have a W-2 job. We would do probably an unsecured term loan, and we would see how much we can get, $50, $100, $200,000 in some form of a term loan. Use that for the franchise fee and some of your working capital. And then it says a van. So vans are very easy to finance with equipment finance. So we can most likely finance
the van 100% with an equipment loan. So when we're looking at these, it's kind of like we're going to see, you don't have a retirement account. Okay, well, you have good credit and income. We can do an unsecured term loan. So we're going to layer in a bunch of different financing facets to get this project done. But it's definitely feasible. It really comes down to your credit profile. Do you have established credit? Sounds like your credit scores are in the 700 plus. So getting an equipment financing should be relatively easy, and getting a term loan shouldn't be that hard either. So that would be the way I would probably first look at it if it wasn't on the SBA 7A approved list. So that's how I would probably look at doing it.
All right, Bobby says, "Hey Beau, I'm looking at purchasing a franchise called Temporary Wall Systems. How do I check to see if it's approved for SBA financing? I'm only interested in purchasing franchises that I can get SBA financing for. Thanks so much."
Great question, Bobby. You can go and just Google SBA franchise directory. They're going to pull it up, but actually May 12th, it's going to be discontinued. I believe it's May 12th. So there's going to be no more directory. That means every franchise is eligible until proven not eligible, meaning the banks are probably going to look at the directory that was existing to look at a reference like, hey, this has been on the approved list. And they'll kind of fast track those. It's gonna be interesting to see how the banks react, because now they're gonna really have to dive more into the weeds of like the franchise disclosure documents, how many units. But I know, speaking to many different banks and credit unions, that a lot of the banks I'm working with, they're all telling me they're ramping up their franchise divisions for SBA. So during COVID, a lot of people are just like, listen, there's got to be a better way. I don't want to work my W-2 job anymore. A lot of people are, whether they're quitting today or they're quitting long-term plan, they're developing plans right now where they're starting a business, like a home-based franchise concept is probably the easiest way to get in, lower startup costs, less employees, that kind of thing. And so a lot of people are financing these types of business right now with a plan of like, once it's up and running, they're going to quit their jobs, which is smart, right? And then there's other like concepts where you could own vending machines and different stuff like that. So circling back, I believe Temporary Walls was on the franchise directory, but that no longer is going to matter. And so when you're talking to a banker about the deal, you're going to want to get your franchise disclosure documents to the lender right away so they can evaluate it, because that's what they're going to do. And it's going to take a little, I think there's going to be, it's going to be kind of the wild, wild west for a little bit on franchises. But I think overall, is there anything that disqualifies this franchise, different management agreements between the franchisor and the franchisee? Those things are going to disqualify based on what they were disqualifying before. So now it might take a little bit more time, but I think the banks that want to do franchise financing, nothing's going to change. You really want to find a bank that really understands franchise, maybe has financed this system before or this concept and knows it. But we can definitely help you navigate any of these questions that you have. And it really comes down to getting all the documents.
Meet Beau Eckstein, the driving force behind Business Ownership Coach. Unlocking the path to business ownership. Visit www.businessownershipcoach.com. Thrive with Business Ownership Coach.
Hey guys, Beau Eckstein here. If you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe to this channel. We talk all things financing. I've been in the lending industry for over 20 years, and I'm happy to answer your questions and provide great content.